They taped a neon orange violation notice on my grandfather's fishing boat, right there on my lake, and ordered me to remove it within 48 hours. They had no idea who I was or what I owned. They wanted a fight over community rules, but they had no clue what was coming next. I didn't think much of the bright splash of orange at first. It looked like a plastic bag caught in the morning breeze, fluttering against the aluminum siding of my grandfather's fishing boat. The sun was barely up, the lake was calm, and I was carrying a mug of strong coffee, expecting another peaceful morning. But as I stepped closer, the truth hit me like a punch in the chest. It wasn't trash. It wasn't a prank. It was an official violation notice taped to my boat with enough waterproof adhesive to survive a hurricane. The words "remove immediately" were printed in massive black letters, followed by a list of threats so absurd I had to blink twice. According to the Maple Creek Estates HOA, my modest 16-foot boat, quiet, clean, and tied neatly to the dock, was non-compliant with community standards and unauthorized on community waters. Community waters. That phrase stopped me. My waters. My family's waters. My lake. Still half asleep, I pulled the notice off and turned it over, expecting to find some mistake, some apology, some hint that this was meant for someone else. But no, it was addressed to resident occupant, written in the kind of condescending tone only a board committee member with too much power could create. It demanded I remove the boat within 48 hours or face a $500 per day fine. They even threatened towing. I laughed once. Short, sharp, and humorless. Towing my boat? From my property. I'd owned the lake for exactly 6 months, but my family had owned it for 3 generations. The HOA couldn't claim so much as a teaspoon of water. Yet there it was, taped to my grandfather's boat, assuming ownership where they had none. I stood on the dock, feeling that familiar burn beneath my ribs, the one that meant trouble was heading straight toward me. I didn't know how big yet. I didn't know how bold they'd become in my family's absence. But I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't going to be the peaceful lake life I'd imagined. And something told me this violation was only the beginning. 6 months earlier, I was a burnt-out software engineer who had spent a decade pushing deadlines, managing crises, and slowly watching my life turn into a never-ending series of video calls. My startup had been successful. More successful than I ever expected. But success came with a price. 12-hour days, sleepless nights, stress that sat on my shoulders like wet cement. When a massive tech conglomerate bought my company, I walked away with enough money to buy peace. What I didn't have was the slightest idea of where to find it. Then I remembered Sullivan Lake. It wasn't just a place on a map. It was a chapter of my childhood. My grandfather bought the lake and surrounding 50 acres back in the 1950s. Long before any housing developments existed here. He was a rugged man, half philosopher, half fisherman, who believed the world could be healed one quiet afternoon at a time. My earliest memories were of sitting beside him on the old wooden dock, listening to him talk about respecting nature and protecting what mattered. He used to say, "Water is life, Jake, and life is something you never take for granted." When he died at 92, he left the lake to my father, who rarely used it. Dad was a city man, always working, always traveling. After he passed away unexpectedly, the property became mine. But I didn't visit for years. I was too busy chasing success, too busy ignoring the burnout that was eating me alive. Only when my company was sold did I finally return. The cabin needed renovation, but the lake was exactly the same, still silent and honest. The moment I stepped onto the dock after years away, the air smelled like pine needles and memories. I knew instantly, this was where I needed to be. So I rebuilt the cabin, restored the dock, cleaned the trails, and moved in with the intention of living quietly, peacefully, and far away from the chaos of the world I'd left behind. Every morning I drank coffee by the water. Every evening I drifted across the lake in my grandfather's weathered boat, feeling closer to him than I had in decades. This place wasn't just property. It was family, legacy, history, and now, in a single neon orange notice, an HOA claimed it was theirs. They had no idea what kind of line they just crossed. By the time I walked back up the dirt path toward the cabin, I'd convinced myself the violation notice was some clerical mistake, a one-off error, maybe a new HOA employee acting on outdated records, the kind of problem that would sort itself out with a phone call or friendly conversation. But the universe has a funny way of confirming trouble. Sitting in my mailbox, right next to a pile of junk coupons and an outdoor gear catalog, was a crisp envelope with the Maple Creek Estates HOA letterhead stamped across the top. I tore it open on the porch, still trying to stay calm, but the moment my eyes skimmed the first paragraph, calmness evaporated. This wasn't a mistake. The letter claimed my boat violated aesthetic regulations, registration protocols, and community watercraft standards. It demanded full compliance and warned that unauthorized lake usage would not be tolerated. And at the bottom, signed in pretentious looping script, was the name Richard Wilkins, HOA president. They were dead serious. I read the letter twice, then a third time, baffled. How could they write something so bold, so confident, so utterly ignorant of basic property law? The lake wasn't community land. It wasn't shared space. It wasn't even adjacent to their development. It belonged to one person, me. Still, the tone of the letter wasn't curious or cooperative. It was authoritarian, final, like some miniature government declaring laws over things it didn't own. I folded the letter slowly, trying to keep my irritation from boiling over. Something didn't add up. Something bigger than a simple violation notice. And deep down, I knew this wasn't just the start of a misunderstanding. It was the start of a battle. I didn't even have time to process the letter before my phone buzzed. The name on the screen made me exhale in relief. Ray Delgado, my closest neighbor and one of the few people around here who actually understood the lake. Ray was in his 70s, tough as an oak tree, and had known my grandfather for decades. If anyone would know what was going on, it was him. "Morning, Jake," he said as soon as I answered, his voice carrying that familiar gravelly warmth. "I see the HOA finally crawled out of their burrows and found you. You knew about this?" I asked, pacing the porch with the violation notice still in my hand. Ray chuckled darkly. "Knew about it? Son, they've been circling this lake like vultures ever since they built that fancy development 10 years ago. They think everything within 5 miles belongs to them. Your grandfather kept them away, but after he passed and your dad stopped coming out here, they started getting bold." I felt the first real twist of unease. "Bold how?" Ray sighed heavily. "Well, for starters, they've been using your lake. Fishing tournaments, club parties, boat launches, all without permission. They even built a temporary dock on the eastern shore last summer. I tore it down myself once, but they put it back up." My grip tightened around the railing. "They've been using my property? For years?" "Yep," Ray said. "And they charged residents extra fees for lake access. They never told folks it wasn't theirs. Your granddad would have chased them off with a shotgun full of rock salt." The anger hit hard now, boiling, undeniable. This wasn't an accidental boundary mix-up. This was entitlement, years of it. Years of acting like my family's lake was their playground. "Jake," Ray continued, voice lowering, "you need to be careful. They don't play fair. Richard Wilkins especially. He's been itching to take over the lake completely. Now that you're back, he's going to push hard." I looked out over the calm water my grandfather protected fiercely, and felt something steel itself inside me. If they wanted a fight, they were about to get one. After hanging up with Ray, I marched inside, sat down at my desk, and opened the Maple Creek Estates HOA website. If they had really been using my lake, I wanted proof. Hard evidence. Something I could shove back at them when the time came. I didn't have to search long. Right there on the homepage was a massive banner, "Annual Lakeside Fishing Derby," complete with smiling residents, colorful tents, and boat launches. All happening on the eastern shore, my eastern shore. I clicked through the photo gallery, my jaw tightening with every picture. Men in expensive fishing gear posing with trout. Kids standing on docks that didn't exist when my grandfather owned the place. Whole families setting up lawn chairs like it was a public park. Every image was another punch. Then I found something worse. A tab labeled Elite Anglers Club. Inside, dozens of glossy photos showed members wearing branded shirts, holding trophies, hosting cookouts, launching boats, installing temporary docks, organizing tournaments, all on my property. They even had a schedule posted. Exclusive access to Sullivan Lake. Exclusive access to my lake. They'd claimed it as their own. And the comments beneath each post made it worse. Best community lake in the county. Glad the HOA keeps this place so well maintained. Love our private lake. Private. The word felt like a spark in dry grass. Scrolling further back, I realized this wasn't a recent development. They had been doing this for at least 5 years. 5 years of quietly treating my family's land as a community amenity. 5 years of building up an illusion of ownership. An illusion that now emboldened them to threaten me about my own boat. But the final blow came when I clicked on an announcement for the upcoming tournament scheduled for next weekend. It bragged about a $5,000 prize pool, a catered barbecue, and full access to the best fishing waters on the private community lake. My fists curled. This wasn't ignorance. This was a con. A long, calculated theft dressed up as community events. I clicked the tab closed, leaned back in my chair, and stared at the lake through the window. The water looked peaceful, innocent, but everything I'd just seen made it feel like the calm before a storm. A storm I was now determined to bring. I needed expert eyes, someone who understood water rights, property law, and how to dismantle arrogant organizations like HOAs. There was only one person who fit that description: Emma Porter. We'd been friends since college, remained close despite our different paths, and she had built a career fighting environmental cases and companies that tried to bend land laws to their advantage. When she picked up, I didn't waste time. "Emma, I need your legal brain," I said. She listened patiently as I explained everything: the violation notice, the years of tournaments, the photos, raise warning. When I finished, she was quiet for a moment. "Jake," she finally said, "let me get this straight. You own the lake. As in the deed includes the lake bed, shoreline, and water rights." "Yes," I said, "completely. It's been in my family since the 50s. And then she laughed. Hard. "Oh my God. This is beautiful," she said. "Jake, they don't have a leg to stand on. This is blatant trespassing, misuse, misrepresentation, possibly fraud if they've collected money for access. You need to gather evidence. Photos, videos, documents. Everything." "I've already got plenty," I replied. "And there's a tournament coming next weekend." She hummed thoughtfully. "Good. Don't confront them yet. Let them keep digging. The more they do, the worse it gets for them." I exhaled, feeling a strange mixture of relief and rising resolve. "Can you come up this weekend?" "I'll be there," she said instantly. "Bring me every piece of paper you have on the property. And Jake, don't let them touch your boat. If they try, it's theft. Record everything." "I've already set up cameras," I told her. "Perfect. Now sit tight. This is going to get interesting." I hung up, feeling the shift inside me the moment fear turned into strategy. The HOA thought they were dealing with a passive resident. What they didn't know was that I had just declared war. The Maple Creek Estates HOA held their meetings in a bland community center that looked like a doctor's office lobby. Soft blue walls, stiff chairs, and a fake plant in every corner. I arrived 10 minutes early, wanting to get a feel for the room before everyone settled in. A few residents trickled in with polite nods, clearly not recognizing me. Why would they? I wasn't part of their development. I didn't owe them a penny, but they certainly acted like they owned everything within sight. At the front of the room stood Richard Wilkins, tall, silver-haired, wearing a suit far too formal for a neighborhood meeting. He carried himself like a CEO of a billion-dollar corporation instead of a man who argued about mailbox heights for a living. When he saw me sit down, confusion flickered across his face. "Can I help you?" he asked with a sour smile. "I'm here for the meeting," I answered casually. He hesitated. "This meeting is for Maple Creek residents. I own property bordering Maple Creek," I said. "That makes your decisions relevant to me." His expression tightened, annoyed but trapped. "Fine. Just Stay quiet unless recognized. The room filled quickly. Chatter rose. Papers shuffled. The meeting began with boring items, trash pickup schedules, landscaping complaints, someone furious about Christmas lights still being up in June. But halfway through, Richard cleared his throat dramatically. Next item, he said loudly, is unauthorized use of the community lake. My eyebrow arched. Community lake. He continued, we have issued a violation notice to a resident who has placed an unregistered boat on our waters. This affects the safety and standards of Maple Creek. I raised my hand. Richard's sigh could have blown out candles. Yes. I stood. Just a quick question. Who exactly owns the lake you're talking about? A ripple of murmurs ran through the room. Richard stiffened. The lake is within Maple Creek's recreational boundaries. That's not my question, I replied calmly. Who owns it? Who holds the deed? The room went silent. A few board members exchanged nervous glances. One woman whispered, doesn't the HOA own it? Another shrugged wildly. Richard's jaw clenched. Everyone knows it's community managed. But not community owned, I said, letting the words sink in. Because I have the deed. My family has owned Sullivan Lake since 1954. Gasps. Heads whipped toward Richard. And in that tense, breathless moment, I realized something. They weren't confused. They were hiding something. 2 mornings later, I walked down to the dock with a mug of coffee in hand. The sky was clear, the lake was glass still, and the air held that early-day calm that always made Sullivan Lake feel sacred. But something was wrong. Terribly wrong. The boat was gone. I froze at the end of the dock, staring at the empty space where my grandfather's fishing boat had rested for decades. For a moment, my brain refused to accept it. Maybe I had tied it on a different post? Maybe Ray had borrowed it? Maybe no. The rope was still there, cut clean. My pulse hammered. I sprinted back to the cabin and checked the security feed. The footage loaded slowly, painfully. Finally, the screen showed it. 3 men wearing safety vests, an HOA-branded truck, and a portable winch. They rolled up at dawn, cut the rope, and dragged the boat up the shoreline like it was trash. At the front of the group, Richard. He stood with his arms crossed, barking orders, watching as they hauled my property away. My blood boiled so hot I could barely think. I called the sheriff's office immediately. My boat has been stolen, I explained, voice tight. I have footage. But the deputy sighed. If the HOA removed it under a violation, it's a civil matter. Not criminal. A civil? It's my lake. They trespassed. Sir, he said, tone bored. Take it up with your HO. I hung up, shaking with fury. They had taken my boat. They had trespassed again. And now they'd crossed into something far uglier. Because if they were willing to steal, they weren't just confident. They were desperate. Emma arrived that afternoon in her beat-up Subaru, stepping out with a binder tucked under one arm and fire in her eyes. Show me everything, she said before I could even greet her. We walked inside and I played the footage of the boat theft. Her jaw dropped. They actually took it? This is perfect. Perfect, I snapped. They stole my grandfather's boat. I know you're angry, she said, softening. But legally, this is gold. They trespassed, seized property without authority, and recorded themselves doing it. This is a slam dunk. She spread papers across my table. Deeds, maps, survey lines, water rights documentation. Your property lines are solid. The lake is fully within your parcel. The HOA has 0 jurisdiction. I pointed to their tournament schedule. They've been profiting off the lake. Oh, that's even better, she said. That's fraud. Charging for access they don't own? Hosting events? Distributing funds? This is a spectacular case. Emma logged into the county records. Let me check something. Her fingers flew across the keyboard. Then she froze. Oh my God, she whispered. What? She turned the screen toward me. There it was, a development application filed by the HOA, a proposal for lakeside amenities, extended boat docks, a private event deck, and luxury cabins. They intended to turn my lake into a resort. and their entire plan hinged on one lie, that they owned it. No wonder Richard is panicking, Emma said. They've been lying to investors. If the truth comes out, the HOA collapses. She looked at me with a sharp smile. Jake, we're not just going to stop them. We're going to crush them. Richard showed up the next morning, marching onto my property like he owned the place. He didn't knock. He didn't call. He strode right up to my porch, chest puffed out, the kind of confidence only someone used to blind obedience could carry. I stepped outside before he could open his mouth. "Morning, Richard," I said, leaning against the railing. "Here to return my boat?" A flicker of discomfort flashed across his face. Quick, but unmistakable. "Your boat was unauthorized," he snapped. "We're holding it until you comply with community regulations." "Community regulations don't apply to me," I said evenly. "And they definitely don't apply to my lake." His jaw clenched. "The lake is part of Maple Creek's recreational zone. It's been maintained by the HOA for years." I smiled slowly. "That's funny, because according to the county, the lake is owned by one person. Me." Richard's face drained of color. "You don't understand," he stammered. "There are plans in motion, agreements, investments. The community depends on this lake." "Agreements built on lies," I replied, "and trespassing, and theft." He swallowed hard, the bravado slipping. "Look, we can work something out. Perhaps we come to a mutually beneficial arrangement. Maybe you grant us access, and we compensate you fairly." "There it is," I said softly. "The scramble." His eyes narrowed. "You don't want to make this difficult." "Oh, but I do," I said, stepping closer. "Because you messed with the wrong family's legacy." I let the next sentence hit like a hammer. "And I know all about your development project." Richard froze. His throat bobbed. His eyes widened. Panic, raw and unmistakable, shimmered across his face. He didn't say another word. He turned and walked away, faster than he arrived. Tournament day arrived like a spectacle. Long before sunrise, the distant thumping of SUV doors, excited chatter, and the squeal of rolling coolers echoed across the woods. When I stepped outside, the lake, my lake, was buzzing with activity. Tents were going up. Barbecue grills were being unloaded. Rows of lawn chairs lined the shoreline. Emma stood beside me, arms crossed. "Every person here is fresh evidence." Boats lined the eastern edge, launching from a temporary wooden dock the HOA had installed overnight. Men wearing elite anglers' club shirts strutted around like celebrities. A massive banner hung between two poles, "Maple Creek Championship Fishing Derby." "This is unbelievable," I muttered. Emma patted her camera. "It's also perfect. Let's get closer." We walked through the crowd unnoticed, recording everything: signs, transactions, staff collecting entry fees, residents discussing our lake, organizers giving directions. The arrogance was astonishing. Then I spotted Richard near the registration tent, greeting people with forced enthusiasm. His eyes darted anxiously around, and sweat soaked through his neatly pressed shirt. He was nervous, very nervous. Next to him stood two men in suits, investors. They flipped through brochures showing mock-ups of luxury cabins and scenic decks built over my water. Emma whispered, "This is bigger than I thought." We drifted closer, capturing their conversation. "Construction can begin by late summer," Richard said, voice tight. "We just need to finalize the lake rights." "Lake rights?" one investor asked. "I thought you already secured ownership." Richard's smile froze. "It's in progress." Emma raised an eyebrow. "He's cooked." The tournament began with a loud whistle. Boats revved. People cheered. Kids ran along the shoreline, all believing this lake was part of their community paradise. And that's when our trap snapped shut. Emma nudged me. "Time." We stepped onto the dock, loudly enough to draw attention. Cameras rolling. Faces turned. Conversations stopped. I called out, "Attention, everyone." Hundreds of eyes shifted toward me. "My name is Jake Sullivan," I said clearly, "and I own this lake. Every inch of it. The HOA has been trespassing, charging you fees, hosting events, lying to you. Gasps erupted. Shock waves rippled through the crowd. Richard's face turned ghost white. And today, I continued, we're filing a court injunction to shut this event down. Emma held up her badge and documentation like a warrior preparing for battle. Chaos erupted. We drove straight to the county courthouse with every piece of evidence we'd collected. Photos, documents, videos, security footage, HOA communications, tournament brochures, payment receipts, and the development proposal. By the time we reached the clerk's office, Emma already had the emergency injunction written and printed. The clerk skimmed the first page, eyebrows rising. You're filing against an HOA? This looks serious. Oh, Emma said with a grin. You've seen nothing yet. The case went directly to Judge Harmon, a stern man known for despising property disputes, but absolutely hating fraud. He reviewed the evidence with increasing disbelief, flipping pages faster and faster. When he got to the tournament photos, he actually muttered, "Unbelievable." He looked up. "Mr. Sullivan, you own the lake?" "Yes, Your Honor." "And the HOA has been using it without permission?" "For years." He turned to Emma. "Counselor, this request for emergency injunction, granted. Effective immediately." A stamp thundered onto the paperwork. Just like that, Maple Creek's house of cards began to fall. We returned to the lake with a sheriff's deputy who posted bright yellow "No trespassing" private property signs along the entire shoreline. When we arrived, tournament chaos was already unfolding. Word had spread. People were demanding refunds. Parents were yelling. Several anglers were arguing with staff. The investors were gone, vanished. Richard stood in the center of the mess, sweating through his collar, shouting orders no one listened to. The deputy approached him calmly. "Sir, this event is shut down by court order. You and your organization are trespassing. Clear the area immediately." Richard sputtered. "You can't do this. This is our lake." The deputy raised an eyebrow. "Not according to the judge." Residents stared at Richard, hurt, furious, betrayed. The perfect facade he'd built for years was crumbling, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. The moment the deputy shut down the tournament, the crowd turned, not on me, but on the HOA. For years they'd been led to believe Maple Creek Estates owned the lake, maintained it, improved it, and generously provided access. Now, standing on the shoreline with the truth echoing in their ears, they saw the reality. They'd been lied to, used, and milked for money. A father holding his son's fishing rod shouted, "You charged us $100 a year for lake maintenance." A woman holding a tournament pass yelled, "Richard, you said we own this place." An older man in an elite angler's shirt stormed toward Richard. "I donated $2,000 to the club because you told me it kept our lake private." Richard's face twisted with panic as people closed in. His board members backed away like they'd never met him. Not a single person defended him. Emma nudged me. Fraud meets sunlight. It always burns. When the sheriff ordered everyone to leave the property, they obeyed, grumbling, shouting, demanding answers as they packed up their gear. The investors slipped away without a word, their dreams of lakeside profits evaporating. I watched Richard try to regain control, raising his hands and pleading, "Everyone, please, this is just a misunderstanding. We'll resolve this quickly." But the deputy cut him off. "Sir, you need to leave the premises. Now." The authority in his voice ended any debate. Richard stepped back, deflated, cornered, defeated. For the first time, I saw fear, real fear, in his eyes. Not fear of me, fear of what was coming. Because with the injunction granted, the trespassing exposed, and the HOA's secrets unraveling, this wasn't just a lost event. It was the beginning of their downfall. The next morning, I woke up to my phone buzzing nonstop. Calls, messages, notifications, and a headline blasted across the local news website. HOA accused of fraud after illegally profiting from privately owned lake. Reporter Sarah Whitmore, a relentless journalist known for exposing shady local politics, had somehow gotten wind of the story overnight. She stood in front of Maple Creek's entrance in the video clip, microphone in hand, with a crowd of angry residents behind her. "Sources confirm," she said, "that the Sullivan family owns the lake in question. The HOA has allegedly charged residents for access to land it does not legally possess." Behind her, residents held signs. "Where did our fees go? We want answers. Stop the lies." It got worse for them. Sarah interviewed several residents who felt cheated, including a few who had donated money, believing they were helping improve their lake. Every quote made Richard look more corrupt. I stepped outside to get some air and found Sarah at my driveway gate with her cameraman. "Mr. Sullivan," she said politely, "may we speak with you?" I considered refusing. Attention wasn't what I wanted. But Emma stepped beside me and whispered, "Let the truth spread." So I told Sarah everything. Calmly, clearly, with receipts. By noon, the story had gone countywide. By evening, statewide. Parents, retirees, anglers, even people from outside Maple Creek flooded social media demanding an investigation. Pressure mounted against the HOA board. Rumors swirled. Residents held emergency gatherings calling for resignations. By sundown, the board had collapsed. All except for Richard. He had vanished. I thought Richard disappearing was just cowardice. Maybe he was hiding at home, too embarrassed to show his face. But Sarah soon uncovered something far deeper. She arrived at my cabin one afternoon with a folder in her hand. "You need to see this," she said. Inside were documents, court records, old newspaper clippings, archived financial reports, all linked to a name I didn't recognize at first. Calvin R. Wilcox. Then I looked closer. The photo was unmistakable. Richard. He had changed his name. 10 years earlier, he'd run a community development committee in another state, one that went bankrupt after accusations of embezzlement. But he fled before charges could be filed. Reinvented himself, moved here, built a facade of legitimacy, and started all over again. Sarah said, "He's been running this same play for years. Fake ownership, false fees, investor baiting. He almost pulled it off again." I shook my head, stunned. "So where is he now?" "No idea," she replied. "But the county prosecutor has opened an investigation. They want him found." Richard's disappearance suddenly made sense. He wasn't hiding. He was running. Because this time, the truth wasn't going away. And neither was the law. In the weeks that followed, Maple Creek Estates was a mess. Confused, embarrassed, fractured. But something unexpected happened. Without Richard's heavy-handed leadership, residents began talking to each other openly, honestly. Meetings were held, real ones, not staged performances. For the first time, people asked what they wanted their community to be. Judge Davis, a retired district judge who lived in the development, stepped up to temporarily guide the HOA until new leadership could be elected. He visited me personally. "Mr. Sullivan," he said warmly, "we never should have let things get this far. The community owes you an apology." "You weren't the problem," I said. "One man was." He nodded gravely. "Still, we want to make things right." Over the next month, we worked together to determine fair rules for lake access. Rules grounded in respect, legality, and sustainability. I proposed something that surprised them. "I'll allow limited access to residents," I said at one meeting, "through a conservation trust. No fees, no tournaments, no development, just quiet fishing, kayaking, and nature." The stunned silence slowly turned into gratitude. People came up afterward to shake my hand, thank me, apologize for assuming the HOA owned the lake. Some shared memories of attending events there, never knowing the truth. Others pledged to help protect the shoreline from erosion and pollution. For the first time since returning, I felt peace again, this time shared, not stolen. The community wasn't the enemy. It had simply been misled. Now, together, we were fixing that. The morning my boat was finally returned, I walked down to the shoreline with a strange mix of nostalgia and triumph. The deputy towing it back shook his head. Can't believe they tried to take this, he murmured. Could. And yet seeing it lowered gently into the water again made something inside me settle. Something old, tied to my grandfather, tied to the quiet lessons he taught me about protecting what matters. I climbed in and pushed away from the dock. The water rippled softly around the hull, and the lake, calm, reflective, timeless, opened before me like a welcome embrace. For a long moment, I just drifted, listening to the whisper of the wind through the pines, thinking of everything that had happened. The lies, the theft, the fight, the victory. This lake had always been a sanctuary, but I had forgotten what it meant. Maybe my grandfather knew that someday someone would try to take advantage of it. Maybe that's why he fought so hard to keep it in the family. As I reached the center of the water, I looked around the shoreline, my shoreline. No tents, no banners, no crowds, just peace. Exactly how it should be. I whispered, "I got it back, Grandpa." A gentle breeze swept across the lake, almost like a response. I turned the boat around, feeling lighter than I had in years. Not because I'd defeated the HOA, not because I'd exposed Richard, but because I'd reclaimed something deeper. My family's legacy, my peace, my home. The lake was mine again, and this time I wasn't letting anyone take it.